So we have 4 people: Sándor, Vera, Natallia. I saw Natallia all
yes,
online.
I'm here. Hello.
Okay, great. And so whom are we missing? So your name is? Vera. Vera. Okay, Vera is here. So we're missing Alena Rudenka. Have you seen Alena? I think she was joining in person. And Alena, can you hear us? If not, we already have 3 people, which is good. So then later I'll connect you. For the time being, you'll be able to. Okay, so let's start with Sándor's presentation. Sándor, it's not your first time at the conference, and we appreciate you being a loyal participant and a speaker on multiple occasions. Sándor is from Debrecen University. Sorry for torturing the name of the university, but you'll get it right, in Hungary. And the title of Sándor's presentation is The Rule of Law in the Early Modern GDL, the case of Mamonich contra Mstislavetz and its cultural background in the book printing. So you have 15 minutes, Sándor, over to you.
Okay, hello. So my question is that can you hear me and can you see my shared presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so the topic is not only a law case, however, from our point of view, the modern law case seems very interesting, as in recent times, Eastern Europe does show us not such a level of culture of rule of law as it was in the early modern age. Yes, but some words about the backgrounds. Pyotr Timofeyev, from the origin from Mstislav, was a famous first printer in Belarusian lands, and he worked in Moscow too, then in Zabudov in eastern Poland, which was a very significant place in the Belarusian book culture, in the Cyrillic book culture, then in the Ukrainian lands. And the law case was the case at the court of law was the cause why Mstislavetz went to Ukrainian land. Thus, Pyotr Timofeyev took his surname from city Mstislav. Therefore, let's say this is what every high school kid in Belarus may know, that Pyotr Timofeyev, but I have to summarize it for the wide public because maybe some colleagues are from another field of research, that Pyotr Timofeyev from Mstislav, who under the name of Mstislavets from his birthplace, worked together with Ivan Fyodorov. Ivan Fyodorov was the very famous first printer, but now in this presentation I will speak about Ivan Fyodorov. And they printed the Gospel in Zabudov. And Pyotr Mstislavets was born in Belarusian city of Mstislav and received a primary education there. Why it is significant? Because Mstislav was a very famous city in early modern age, a city of bourgeois society. about that I will say some words as for the next slide. And the way of Ivan Fyodorov and Mstislavetz were separated after Zabludov. So they went to Moscow, then they came to Zabludov, then they were separated, and Mstislavetz went to Vilna, then time Vilnius, the name of Vilnius in that time, and Ivan Fyodorov went to Ukrainian lands. Thus, why Mstislav is important? Because Pyotr Timofeyev was grown up in Mstislav. And Mstislav was a very ancient city already, as you can see in this slide. In the 1359, the Lithuanian Prince Algirdas captured Mstislav and annexed it to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Therefore, from the middle of the 14th century, the city Mstislav was a significant part of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, but not the East Russian lands. And what is still important, then in 1634, King Vladislav IV of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth granted the Magdeburg rights to the city, but it was much later than Pyotr Timofeyev of Mstislav grew up there, for our story took place in the 16th century, but the bourgeois development of the city of Mstislav was even significant and impacted on the character of Pyotr Mstislavetz. Thus, this is a sculpture of Mstislavetz of Mstislav, and you can see in this slide the printing equipment of that time. And as for Ivan Fyodorov, Mstislavetz accompanied Ivan Fyodorov to Moscow, but we have no original picture from Ivan Fyodorov, but some handwriting signature of Ivan Fyodorov in Polish language. You can see the Polish orthography, that's the W, Fedorovich, this is a Polish orthography, and the famous Ostrog Bible, which was printed in Ukraine in 1581. That's much later than our story took place, because a decade earlier they together printed the Didactic Gospel in Zabludov. This is a very famous book in the Belarusian book culture, because the Didactic Gospel originated in the Byzantine tradition. It was not a Protestant innovation. It's originated in Byzantine Orthodoxy. As for an author in Vilnius, Sergius Temchinus in Lithuanian, but he's a Russian person in Vilnius, published a lot of papers, several papers about the Didactic Gospels, roots in the Byzantine Orthodoxy. Thus, in Moscow, Mstislavetz and Ivan Fyodorov printed the Apostle, and ornaments in the Apostle appeared then a decade later in Lviv Apostol, which was printed by Ivan Fyodorov. Thus, this decade between two apostles is the time of our story. Thus, in Moscow, they printed some books, but they were sacked from Moscow because the East Russian Orthodoxy, the East Slavic Orthodoxy was divided to the Orthodoxy in Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which went on the way of the bourgeois development, and the Moscow Orthodoxy, which was very traditional, one-track mind, and they sacked Mstislavetz and Fyodorov because they were thus agent of the devil, and book printing was something, the thing of devil. So they went to Zabludov in eastern Poland, and the significant figure, Mstislavetz and Fyodorov worked in Zabludov and printed the Didactic Gospel in Zabludov. However, the same year when the Didactic Gospel in Zabludov was printed was the year of the Union of Lublin, and the Union of Lublin impacted much on the Orthodoxy, because the Union of Lublin was the birth of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and as well the birth of the very strong Polonization. And that's why Ivan Fyodorov went to Ukraine. Some references are given in this slide. As Nemirovsky, a famous Russian but clever author about the history of first printers. And Ivan Fyodorov moved to Ukraine and printed there the Ostrog Bible with the support of Prince Konstantin Ostrogski, and Mstislavetz went to Vilna. Thus, this was the Moscow Apostle, and this ornament where this evangelist is sitting and writing the gospel appear then in book ornaments. Thus, this was the point when the development between the two types of the Orthodoxy divided. Thus, under the democratic state of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, where the king was elected, and the despotic state of Muscovy, the two type of Orthodox culture was very different, but we have no time. It is not within the. It cannot be put within the framework of our paper, but as a historical background. Thus, the didactic gospel was the culmination of the activity of Mstislavetz and of Fyodorov, and references as for didactic gospel, as I mentioned, the debates about the Protestant impacts and Byzantine roots are given in my longer paper here, the references for the didactic gospel. So then, as for the Orthodoxy in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, it is important that these frames of these books appear then in the Western Christian Lithuanian books, for instance, the Catholic Postilla of Daugšča in Lithuanian language, and the Protestant Postilla of Morkūnas in Lithuanian language, and they rooted in Luther's Bible title pages. So that's for the cultural unity of this Protestant lands. Thus, from Zabudov to Vilna, Mstislavetz didn't accompany Fyodorov, and in Vilna the urban population was very significant, because Vilnius was already a city with self-government under the Magdeburg law, and I mentioned the huge monograph by the Ukrainian author Leonid Timoshenko about the cultural history of Vilna, and then in Vilna was established the second significant printing house of Cyrillic book printing with the Mamonich brothers, Kuzma and Leon Mamonich. And the Mamonich typography in Vilna was significant because after Skaryna and Francis Skaryna, there was no printing activity, but it was a very active and prolific printing house. And Mamonich family was connected to the Zaretsky family, that they were rich families of the higher bourgeoisie in that land. So I mentioned, as for city Mstislav, that the bourgeois development is significant in the lands of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, and as in the aspect of our story. And then Mstislavetz, thus, where is the low case? No, so the low case I say in one sentence because I haven't made a separate slide of the low case. The low case was that Kuzma and Leon Mamonich had some debate with Mstislavetz, and this case from the court of law went up to the king, Stefan Batory, as I have shown already. Stefan Batory, who was a great counterpart of Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Grozny, Ivan the Terrible, and the king ordered to repeat the procedure at the first level of the court of law. Okay, so this is the point. This is the law case, and then it was very significant, because let's imagine what would be happened in Moscow. In Moscow, Ivan the Terrible, the despotic Tsar, would decide the case and confiscate all of fortune of these rich printers. But in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, King Batory ordered that on the first level, the official procedure must be repeated. But they didn't appear at the court of law, and Mstislavetz moved to the Ukrainian lands and took with him some equipment, including boards of engraving and frames of certain books, because Mstislavetz was of the opinion that he required some money from Kuzma and Leo Mamonich, and they didn't pay him. Thus, this was the subject of the court of law, and Mstislavetz simply moved away to the Ukrainian lands, which belonged to the Polish crown after the Lublin Union, as I have mentioned, the Lublin Union. Therefore, it was a very modern way of solution, not as a way of solution in the despotic Muscovy, but a very modern way of solution. So that's why I say that this was the case of the rule of law in the Belarusian lands, and that's why I spoke about the city of Mstislav as a bourgeois city. So the bourgeois culture, the modern culture on Belarusian lands appeared not only due to the Magdeburg law in these cities, but due to the behavior and way of work of these capitalist people in Belarus. Yes, I am summarizing. Mm-hmm. And then book ornaments appeared in Ukrainian lands. Thus Mstislavetz went to Ukrainian lands, and this was the point when the Belarusian printed book culture appeared in the Southlands up to the Champolung at the border of Romania, Champolung in the Romanian country. So due to this law case, the ornaments of Cyrillic books printed in Vilna and Zabludov appeared in the South Ukrainian lands. And this was the point when the book culture from Belarusian lands was spread up to Southlands, up to the border of Romania. Thus, this is the discussion and evaluation that in these frameworks of the society, thus the printing activity worked due to the early modern bourgeois development within the frameworks of the strict rule of law. And due to these circumstances, Mstislavetz simply moved to Ukrainian lands, and this was the point when the Belarusian engraving, so not the Belarusian, but the Cyrillic Orthodox, simply they were Belarusian, were spread to Ukrainian lands where the culture of engraving was still not on the level of culture of book ornaments in Grand Duchy of Lithuania. So that's why I always emphasize the differences between the imperial Tsardom of Ivan the Terrible and the bourgeois development of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. So that was the main thing I want to say as a background to this law case. as a cultural and social background of the locales, and when at the end of the panel and the discussion some critics and remarks, I will be more than happy to.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much, Sándor. So we're moving on to Vera, because we will take questions at the end after all three presentations. And I just realized that Alena Rudenka is actually speaking on Saturday, not today. She joined a different panel. So over to you. Vera is from the University of Edinburgh, right? Do you want to say? Okay, you have. We can do that. Let's see. Yep, I have many presentations. Let's hope it's the one. Okay. So can you see which one is yours?
Yeah.
This one?
Haponava.
Right now you're muted.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did you press anything to unmute this, or should
Yeah,
I-
it's on.
Okay, so
no.
can you hear me online?
You should assume so. Yeah.
Okay, I will assume so, if you say so. Fine. So I'm going to present the results of my PhD project titled Palaeodiet in Belarus from Birth till Adulthood. I'll begin with talking about my theoretical framework, then we'll proceed to aims, methods, and materials, after which I will shortly show the results related to major food sources. Then the main focus of my study, weaning and childhood diet, and if we have time, I'll say a few words about any changes that could be observed in adolescence. So the theoretical framework of my research was based on childhood social theory. This is what I presented at the same conference about 2 years ago, so I will only touch upon it briefly. The recent focus of childhood social theory has been on recognizing it as a biosocial phenomenon. Children should be seen as social actors who actively participate in the production of culture and not as just passive recipients of external influences. Some of the major takeaways of this theory into archaeology were recognition of heterogeneity of childhood and the fact that its definition varies across time, geography, and across gender, social status, etc. At the same time, more universal biological aspects also affect the agency of children and how they're perceived by others. And one of the practical applications of it was the notion of social age, which refers to norms of appropriate behavior and status, and is used in contrast to chronological or biological age. When I speak about agency of children, I like to give examples from Belarusian historic characters. For example, in the famous legend of Ragneda and Iziaslav, Ragneda was supposedly about 12 when Vladimir took her, and Iziaslav about the age of 7 when his mother gave him the sword to protect her. The person of Połack also decided to abandon princely life and take monastic vows about the age of 12. Still, when you approach the topic, it appears that children were not studied in the past of Belarus almost at all, though they apparently played an important role in the society, and not only those of them from princely circles. With all that in mind, what I wanted to do was to explore the weaning and childhood diets and experiences in the past inhabitants of Belarus from birth till adulthood and compare them between sexes and time periods. For that, I used stable carbon and nitrogen isotopes, of which I will tell a bit more in a minute. The territory of focus of my research was Połack clans, 3 sites in Połack itself, Upper Castle, Lower Castle, and Township. Also, individuals from the Rudenka cemetery of Pahošča were included. So the time span covered from the 10th to the 18th century CE, from ancient Rus and Poland's principality to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, to the end of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. To elucidate childhood diet and experience, I collected 76 teeth from 43 adult archaeological individuals. Because unlike bone, tooth tissues do not remodel after they are formed. They preserve isotopic signal from the time of formation. So teeth are formed from crown to the root in layers. And if you take microsamples from them sequentially, you can reconstruct individual life course like in tree rings. And as I collected early and late developing teeth from the same individuals, the time span covered from birth till adolescence, plus bone collagen samples from these adult individuals were used to reflect the isotope signals close to the time of death. So you have not a 100% coherent, but a sequence from birth till adulthood. Now, before I proceed to the results and start showing graphs, a couple of words on how to read the graphs. The basis of use of stable isotopes of carbon and nitrogen in archaeology is the idea that you are what you eat. So nitrogen and to a lesser extent carbon the ratios in consumer tissues tend to increase with trophic level. So if you put nitrogen on your y-axis and carbon on your x-axis, here will be your plants, herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. Also, in aquatic environments, nitrogen tends to be higher. Carbon is mostly used to differentiate groups of plants which utilize C3 photosynthesis pathway, which will be most of the plants we eat, and C4 photosynthesis pathway, which in case of Belarus will be mostly millet. Also, carbon tends to be high in marine environments and often quite low in freshwater environments. This is if you want to explain stable isotopes in archaeology in one slide. And in reality, of course, it is much more complex. And apart from trophic level and C3, C4, there are very many other things, such as physiological factors and environmental factors which can vary the isotope ratios. But we do not need to know them for the sake of this presentation. Now we will proceed to the results, starting with the major food sources. Those were estimated based on bone collagen isotope ratios and historic and archaeological sources such as plant and animal remains. What we find are quite homogeneous diets, primarily reliant on C3 resources. They were likely consumed in the form of bread, gruel, and beer, primarily made from rye, wheat, barley, and oats, and supplemented with meat, dairy products, vegetables, mushrooms, legumes, and so on. Freshwater fish consumption was likely negligible across all the sites in my study. Pahošča individuals showed the most clear evidence of mixed C3 and C4 diets. So remember, if nitrogen is on the y-axis and carbon on the x-axis, the gray crosses are Pahošča individuals. They are to the right of Połack, so they are closer to the end of the axis where C4 eaters would be. And the graph below has Belarusian samples, the dots with black outlines, compared to a large data set of all published stable isotope measurements from the region of Northeastern Europe and Northern Asia. The Belarusian samples tend to cluster in this yellow group with other settlements where agriculture played an important role in the economy and consumption of C4, freshwater and marine resources was low.
So is it yellow? I can see green here.
No, well, some of them
shadows
are green.
of green.
Okay, this is blue, and this is where most of the Belarusian sites cluster. Some of them also appear across this mixed diet cluster, and a little bit of them also appear across this, but the majority of them are within here.
Okay.
Yeah, and this would be more like freshwater influence, mixed diets, and this would be more like C4 stuff that eats millets or Kazakhstan arid environments. And this one was high either freshwater marine or high animal protein cluster. So these two clusters had none of the Belarusian samples in them, and this cluster had most of them. So more or less, it fits the idea that agriculture was the main economic activity, and the products of it were the main sources. Okay, now I will explain how we track winning in stable isotope profiles. So if you measure nitrogen isotopes on the x-axis here, from birth to early childhood, age now is on the x-axis, not current age, So what you expect is a picture like this. At the time of birth, babies' nitrogen values are close to mothers. When the baby starts to consume breast milk, nitrogen values increase because baby is consuming mother's tissue to a one trophic level above the mother. This is the point at the top of the curve where solid foods start to be introduced into the baby's diets, and nitrogen begins to go down as weaning starts. At the bottom of the curve is the moment where breastfeeding completely ceased and weaning was completed. After that, the values either stabilize or grow again. And here is an example of a typical weaning curve in my Połack samples. So the two isotopes are on x-axis. Nitrogen is orange and carbon is blue, and age is on the x-axis. Yeah. So you can see that in my samples, I mostly do not have the rising part of the curve because I dealt with worn teeth where the initial increments close to the time of birth were missing. But you can see the sharp drop in nitrogen up until about 2.5 years. This is the second part of the curve. Okay, so on average, weaning in my samples occurred about 3.4 years. And it is longer than in most modern babies, but it is actually quite similar to other sites in late medieval, modern Polish and Lithuanian territories. We do not have enough data to suggest when weaning began, but potentially it was earlier than 2 years and maybe as early as 6 months, which is what is currently recommended by the World Health Organization. Mixed diets continued for about 1 to 3 years, and this suggests that weaning process was not abrupt. Based on the magnitude of drop in nitrogen and the pattern in carbon, most of these individuals probably experienced some stress during infancy. And this dip in nitrogen after weaning, followed by a slow gradual increase into adulthood, possibly suggests that weaning foods were slightly lower in animal protein than adult diets. And except in Połack, majority of them were based on C3 resources and probably included animal milk, pumps, gruels, and soups. Now we will check out a few individual cases and some exceptions. So this is Kluben 12 from Pahošča with burial 2, richly equipped with spear, axe, and whatnot. And next to it is burial 3 with no objects. Both of these are male. So when an individual from the richly equipped burial 2 was a baby, he was weaned about the age of 3, so close to the average. When individual 3 was a baby, he seems to have had some breast feeding continuing until about the age of 5. And it's also possible that the weaning in him began as late as about 2 years. And such extended breastfeeding is often interpreted as a response to food shortage. Apparently, there are other possible explanations, including, for example, health of the infant. We can see the children may be breastfed for longer, or the desire of the mother or the nurse to prolong the contraceptive effect of breastfeeding, because people in the past were quite aware of this effect. But in this case, since we have information about grave furnishings and the difference in them, there is some more evidence to suggest that possibly the socioeconomic status of these individuals or their families affected their childhood health or availability of weaning foods. And the second specific case will be artificial feeding. Here we have a possible female from Poland with typical weaning birth ending about the usual age of 3. And below we have a male individual with no weaning curve and in general flat profile. So here it is possible that weaning was completed before the measured sequence began, so before 1 year, or that no breastfeeding took place at all. There are various reasons why babies may not be breastfed, including the death or absence of the mother, or abandonment of the infant, or again, health problems like stressful or premature birth. And scholars suggest that the chances of survival without breastfeeding in the past were very low. Still, in some other past individuals, such flat profiles occurred, and those individuals survived beyond infancy. So dry feeding was sometimes successful, and we know that alternative ways of care were known from at least as early as 4000 BC. And ways of artificially feeding infants included consumption of liquid food from this kind of infant feeding vessels, or from this kind of animal horns, or consumption of animal meat directly from the udder of an animal. Now, if we have time, I will quickly say a few words about some changes we can observe after weaning finished. For example, between 7 and 10 years, there seems to be some increase in nitrogen associated with little change in carbon. This could be potentially a small increase in animal protein consumption, and for this, there is some support in historic accounts. And social significance of the age of 7 was also noted in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania through the beginning of separate education for boys and girls, and in ancient Rus through changes in oral treatment. And this rise is interrupted after 10 years by lower values, possibly due to the beginning of pubertal growth spurts. And also in many individuals, there was another increase in nitrogen from 17 to 21 years associated with the opposing change in carbon, or no change in carbon, which would be consistent with a period of stress, whether physiological or nutritional, though dietary factors can be excluded either. In my opinion, this could be associated with increased mobility and independence through marriage or work, possibly movement to another household or settlement, which could affect the level of stress or the change in diet in Połack and Pahošča individuals. The last specific case we will look at is pregnancy. Here we have a model by Polyethnicity et al. Of how pregnancy with lactation would look in nitrogen profile of modern individuals. In 2 of my female individuals, change that would be consistent with pregnancy with 3 to 3.5 years of lactation was observed between 16 and 21 years, for example, in this individual from a richly equipped Rudenka 7 in Pahošča. Apparently, pregnancy is not the only possible explanation for this change, and actually such dips in nitrogen lasting 3-4 years were also observed in some male individuals, like this one from Połack grave 2. So there are alternative explanations possible, such as decrease in freshwater fish consumption or recovery from starvation, possibly. Okay, I hope you enjoyed those glimpses into the past lives of Pahošča Połack individuals. Many thanks to all the people who contributed to my project and my survival during PhD.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. Let's hold questions until after the next presentation. And so let me now invite Natallia, Dr. Natallia Harkovich from the University of Warsaw, who will speak on the following topic: whether the Orthodox Church Council of Jassy 1595 took place a view through manuscript analysis. Over to you, Natallia. If you want to share your screen, just click the share button. You should be able to do it.
Can you see?
Yes, we can. We can see and can hear you as well.
Dear colleagues, I'm presenting a very specific thing. We are switching to the 16th century, 17th century, to the Rzeczpospolite, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. I hope they had a nice diet to conquer to each other, because we are back to the problem of breast church union and confessional conflicts of those times. So when I'm speaking about this case, when I'm speaking about Jassy 1595, because it's one of the points which show us the conflict chronology, which raised after, before and after the Breast Church Union Council. So I just put in some points to understand the context, what was happening before the Brest Church Union. I'm going to the 1595 to explain you why it's so important. So we know a lot about the conflicts in Vilna, confessional ones, from another researchers. For example, a big research was made by Tomasz Kempa and also by another researchers and historians. So this conflict was interesting for me because of contradictions between Orthodox confraternities and its representative Stefan Zizani and Metropolitan of Kiev, Mikhail Ragoza. And this conflict shows us how each side was trying to defend its own position, to be right and to be according to the canonical law, and to defend themselves in a historical context that Mikhail Ragoza accused Stefan Zizani and other brotherhoods leaders of not being obedient to him after all this activity of hierarchy to join the Roman jurisdiction of Pope of Rome. So, and Metropolitan faced the uprising of Orthodox believers of Vilna. So, and my point is they had the background of the decision of Jassy Council to be so strict not to be obedient to Metropolitan in Vilna in this period. So the main point of this decree in Jassy that you cannot obedient to Metropolitan if he is out of obedience of Constantinople. So when we look at the researchers' papers, well-known Ihar Skačilas said in his work that we don't see any document on connected with the person of Zizani and reference to Jassy Council, but according to my researchers, there were some connections in metropolitan metropolitan charters to Stefan Zizani, also some connection to these documents. To this document is we can see in the decision of Brest Council, which condemned the Union Council. So we know that at the time it was impossible to transfer from Jassy to Rzeczpospolitej, Common Lithuanian Commonwealth, any documents from the Constantinople Church hierarchy, and because the civil the king banned all the documentary from there. Also, they couldn't use it openly. So my suggestion is that Orthodox believers, confraternities, used this Jassy decree, and that's why they were so strict not to be obedient to Metropolitan, who accepted the Roman jurisdiction. They switched jurisdiction. So we say that this conflict in Vilna was so had a very high tension. So and that's why this council is so important. If we look at works of Romanian researchers, we cannot find the one decision if this council was or took place or not. So you can see names of these researchers which didn't agree to each other. So, and if we speak about the this corpus of manuscripts, which researchers call Codex and Album, it's well known and contain all the documents that about documentation of Lviv Orthodox confraternity. They are kept in these two institutions in Ukraine, so it's rather hard to work with them now for me, for example. That's why I'm guided by colleagues, paleographists, so such as Boris von Kich, who said that this codex consists of copies of charters of Constantinople patriarchs, and this corpus of documents started in 1610. And he mentioned, this researcher, that all the inscriptions, some of inscriptions were originally put inside this codex, and this codex 3 times was traveling to Constantinople and back from Lviv to Constantinople to be signed by patriarchs. One of the most important things, the author and the manuscript type was belonged to Arseniu of Elasson. The part of these documents were written by his hand. It's very important because he presented at the Council of Brest, which condemned the Uniate Council, and also he was the well-known person in Constantinople. The second, we can see at the publicated decree of this council from what manuscript they took the text, and we see that it was taken from this album, and also that these people, Cassianidis, for example, also written this text. So what is my point also? That in 1602, another researcher, Yulia Shustova, who prepared the research, the book on the documents of Lviv confraternity, she said that he was in Lviv and was contacting to and was close to Protosyngilus Nitsifor Cantacuzin, who we think was one of the editors of Jassy decree. What important tells us Boris von Kich that it was never firstly contained the original texts, and secondly it was never how it's in English, it was never separated from the beginning. So while the representatives of Lviv confraternity were taking the manuscript to Constantinople, they added another manuscripts to sign these manuscripts by Constantinople patriarchs, and it wasn't changed or took or added later to this manuscript any other details. my short conclusions, you see the screen, and my point is, if we're speaking about the Council of 1595, of course, it was a very political act to defend the Orthodox believers who didn't want to join the jurisdiction of Rome. I can understand the arguments of researchers who say that it wasn't impossible to call the council physically at the times in Jassy because of political situation and war, probably they had only decisions and named this decision the decision of Council of Jassy. But as if we see to the manuscripts, there are a lot of signs that it had the canonical law force for Orthodox believers in 16th and 17th century. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Natalia. And I think that concludes the presentations, and we have now around 15 minutes or so for questions. And I'll ask, let me ask one question. Actually, I will ask one question for every participant. For Sándor, my question is, how do you define the rule of law? So when you're comparing in different countries, so what are the main criteria? And because I understand that you're comparing several jurisdictions, and what are the most important parts of this definition? My question for Vera is, more generally, how long do people live around that time, and why did people die? Well, sorry, it's not about kids. Well, kids also died, but more generally, their lifestyle. And the last question for Natallia, maybe you could give an overview of relations between various confessions in Belarus around that time, the time which you are currently discussing in your presentation, for those people who do not know much about religion and the history of religion in Belarus. So Sándor, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so thanks so much. Defining the rule of law, it's was another presentation. So briefly, as for this case, as for the case of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Belarusian lands and Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, in contrary to the Tsarist Muscovy, thus the law was an organizing principle of the way of life. So this societies, associations, thus brotherhood, the Vilna Brotherhood was mentioned by Natallia Harkovich, and enterprise of Mamonich typography worked according negotiations between people. While in Muscovy, where Mstislavetz and Fyodorov first proved to print, the way of life was organized due to order, due to thus something weighted from above. So in the Belarusian lands, why I'm speaking about bourgeois society, because the associations of people defined their rules and decided on the basis of their rules. Therefore, King Stephen Batory, King of Poland and Grand Duchy of Lithuania, sent back this case to the first level of the law procedure, because at the first level of the law procedure, and the subsidiary appears here too, but I don't speak more, thus because the king was, as a king was elected, they decided that the case must be decided at the place, because these association of people negotiated between each other. But in the Tsarist Muscovy, where Mstislavetz and Fyodorov couldn't stay for a longer time, the society was organized according to the order of the ruler. So this is the great difference. Thus, the rule of law means, in wide sense, in my opinion, the rule of law means in wide sense when the relations of people depend, and I'm finishing with this, that relations of people depends not some transcendent religious principle, or not some absolute ruler, but relations of people based on the negotiations of people. And this way of life appeared in the early modern age due to the bourgeoisie. This is the principle of the bourgeois society. Thus, rule of law is not the law state, as in German, the Rechtsstaat. That is something other. The rule of law is when, if I have a brother, a friend, and an enterprise, then we negotiate between each other how we will work. And this is our principle. And we people create our principles how to work. Not some ruler.
It sounds more
That's
like
my
democracy
point
to me rather than the rule of law, because as a lawyer, I do quite a lot of work on the rule of law. And the usual definition is that no one is above the law. It means that it's binding for everyone, be it the Tsar or the king or like a peasant. But yeah, thank you. So it's participatory democracy. That's a defining feature. Vera, over to you.
Okay, I guess when you ask about how long people lived, you already know the answer more or less, that life expectancy was lower. But there are also problems with saying it more specifically, because at least in archaeology, there are no reliable methods of determining the age of older people. Most of the archaeological skeletons would be defined as 50 plus, and you would never know how actually old they were. So when we speak about life expectancy, yes, many people lived until probably middle adulthood. At least from skeletal remains, that's the most common age probably, and the many of them died due to illnesses. But life expectancy per se would be also affected by the fact that we cannot define the age of older people, though apparently some of them lived until 80 or so on, and also by the fact that about half of infants died, and this is what drags the life expectancy down so much. And this is one of the reasons why questions like how they were breastfed the wind and of all the means that society came up with to keep those babies alive are important, because their survival affected the population dynamic so much.
And at that time, I imagine there was no alcohol or tobacco, right? So
there was alcohol. Alcohol was around for a long time. And when I said that beer was one of the main products, it was probably more common than water, because it was safer to drink than water.
Oh, I see. Okay. And was the life expectancy of women and men also very different? Because now in Belarus, the gap is one of the highest in the world.
I'd say I do not know, because I can't really quote any study on this, but also there is an expectation that more men died in conflict, but more women died during childbirth. So I imagine possibly both of them had ways of leaving the world quite early.
Many thanks. And now, Natallia?
My answer is, in short, everything was complicated, but mainly we are speaking about big changes in region. If in Western Europe, we at this time, at the end of the 16th century, we have practically the finished process of confessionalization, when the And when governance tried to make a homogeny in confessional sphere, in Grand Duchy of in Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, we see the start of these processes, so which provoked a lot of conflicts and contradictions inside the society. It was divided for many years, and these processes gave a lot of issues for researchers, in short.
Yeah, but it's a very divided country when it comes to religion, right? From my limited knowledge.
Yes, exactly.
But Protestantism was not there yet on the scene. I'm trying to remember.
So we in short, we can say that there was the process of Reformation, then the process of Counter-Reformation, and during this process of Counter-Reformation, which was also later than in the Western Europe, we see that the Counter-Reformation squashed as Protestants, so Orthodox.
Thank you. And now let's open the floor to questions in the audience, and we'll have a microphone, so please wait until the microphone reaches you so that people can hear you online as well. There's a question.
Thank you to all presenters. I have millions of questions, but I will limit me for two very brief ones. First one for Natallia. Wallachia and Moldavia were these rare, more or less independent Orthodox polities of the time. And how was their involvement in these union-related processes in Poland and Lithuania? Because normally in Belarusian historiography, it's like a blind spot, but I suppose it should be something more. And a brief also question for Vera. I remember that in Canon Lochen book, this of 17th century, it was among things surprising for me to see that if women abandon breastfeeding before 3 years of child, it is like neglection of child, it is a sin to be confessed. But I see at your samples, it was not common to breastfeed until 3. Maybe it's possible to see maybe social difference or cultural difference, or maybe you can see some cultural tradition behind this, or it was just male monk fantasies how women should behave. Thank you.
I will start answering the question. Yes, I completely agree to you, because this region was the region of transfer and connection to the Constantinople Patriarchate, as I see it. Also, we don't estimate all the sense of that tradition, and this council shows that it was a very important place as for Constantinople Patriarchates, so for Orthodox believers in Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Besides, we know that the Lviv confraternity was very connected to this region, to the heads of these regions, because they collected even donations for their churches. I believe one day my hands come to the archives to research more about these facts, about these connections. Thank you for your question.
There's a question from Peter, and then actually Natalia herself has a question. So Peter, you want to go ahead?
You want me to answer the question?
Sorry? Oh yeah, there's one. Go. Then they just give them one. Sorry.
So I like the point about the historical text being fantasies or not, because many times when I see any work describing whatever was written in medical text of the time, for example, many authors also remark on the idea that possibly all of these lengthy recommendations are one thing, and possibly what the authors of those books condemned as unsuitable was more reflective of the actual practice than whatever they recommended. But in this specific case, the average that I had in my samples was actually 3.4, so more than 3 years. So it seems like most of them were actually breastfed, at least most of them who survived, because my sample consists only of the survivors. And it would be interesting to look at non-survivors and for how long they were breastfed and whether it succeeded at all. But apart from the desire to breastfeed them for 3 years, there may be many reasons why they could or not accomplish this, because both the infant and the mother might have various problems and reasons in either their health or their personal choices, which would make it impossible to do 3 years of breastfeeding.
May I ask the question?
Yeah, maybe Natalia, go ahead, and then Peter, while you're still on the screen.
My questions to Professor Sándor Földvári. Did you study the origin of Mstislavetz printing samples? Any suggestions? And the second question, why you believe that this sample from Mstislavetz went to Western Europe, not the Western Europe itself produced it a little bit later in another typographies?
Two questions are very simple. I begin with the second question. You have written in the chat too. Nobody said that these samples came to West from the East. But the Luther's Bible and the Polish author Agnieszka Gronek, maybe you know the work of Agnieszka Gronek. She wrote in Krakow an article about these motifs, very famous. Thus you are nodding, that's Agnieszka Gronek. Das Luther Bible impacted on Ivan Fyodorov and Mstislavetz titles, but these are only about the frames. And then Ivan Fyodorov's and Mstislavetz frames from the Ostrog Bible and from the Apostle in Moscow, then Apostle in Lviv, then practically with the Apostle in Moscow came to the Lithuanian frames, but not to West Europe, because Lithuania is not in West Europe. I beg your pardon, but I beg pardon from my Lithuanian friends. Lithuania is not in Western Europe, as you wrote in the chat. That's Luther's Bible was printed in Western Europe and impacted on the Cyrillic book printing in the then Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which is a great thing and analyzed by Agnieszka Gronek. And then 2 Lithuanian postillas were printed under the impact of the Mamonich typography, because Lithuanian postillas and Daugša in the late 80s of the 19th century and Morkunas in the 90s of the 19th century were printed a decade later. That's for the second question. It's very simple, and it is elaborated in Polish authors, not only Agnieszka Gronek, but she gives the references. As for the origin of Mstislav, it's an open question, because I refer to Zyornova, but you know very well Zyornova. Maybe the public sitting here don't know where Zyornova, but my answer is that I am following Zyornova's articles, which you know, she about Mstislavetz, but Zyornova worked in the middle of the last century. And after Zyornova, no new idea appeared. So I mean that Mstislavetz was a creative personality himself too. So because in this 2 persons, that's Fyodorov and Mstislavetz was who was responsible for the book illumination, for the ornaments. Thus I mean that Mstislavetz, and that's why I refer to the city of Mstislav, and that's why I refer to the Zyornova, because after Zyornova nobody conducted new research. That's why I say that we have solid articles of Zyornova in Moscow.
Yes, thank you very much. I know her works. Yes.
Nothing more. Nothing more. That is
So
open
you yourself
question.
didn't try to identify anything.
Sorry?
Didn't you try yourself to identify anything?
So what do I identify?
The origins of samples of Mstislavetz on which you was speaking about.
It requires to repeat this Journal of works to sit in this collection. So I tried to stay in Minsk in Belarus a decade ago, but that's my personal story. That why I wanted to. So I cannot verify what's Journal of work.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer.
She visited every collection, and how can I identify from home if I don't take? I spent 3 days in the Minsk National Library in my life, and Zornova spent 30 years on this book. So it requires a huge new work of research, a life from research.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you.
Okay, over to Peter now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the panel. So I'm Peter from UCL CES, and my question is to Vera, and I apologize because I had to dash out of the room halfway through Vera's presentation, but I was interested, where were you able to find all this data? What was your data source for all these bones that were analyzing, I assume? I was just wondering where all that was available. Was that you getting these analyzed, or were you going to somebody else, if they're interested in your research, maybe also analyze this kind of work? Thank you very much.
So samples from Połack were the ones that I collected back when I was in Belarus in 2019 from Połack University. Old issue. They still signed the papers back then. Samples from Pahošča were handed over by the colleagues from the Institute of History from our Academy of Sciences when I was already here. So it was a bit of a travel through Europe to Edinburgh, but they came fine. There were some other samples which are not included in this work, but basically it is still possible to work with people who are your colleagues in the Academy of Science and try to get samples from them, or at least I succeeded in it as far as 2022, I think. And even now, when I discuss the possibility of getting more samples for the next project, they right now still believe that maybe the director of Institute of History will even sign more papers, because apparently for institutions in Europe, it is important to confirm that you obtained them ethically, instead of just stealing from the university or curators. So, well, if others are interested, the samples that I collected, parts of them are still stored at the laboratory of the University of Edinburgh, and some other at the laboratory in Max Planck in Germany, where I processed them on elemental analyzer. And if anyone is looking to obtain more, just talk to your colleagues in Belarus. And
also the data you analyzed? Is that like the data sets and things like that? Is that accessible by?
Oh yeah, okay, of course.
This kind of thing. Yeah.
So this, what I presented, has not been published yet. Once it will be, then it will be the previous study that I. All the raw data, like the raw measurements, are also attached to the publication. Once I am done with my PhD, defend my thesis and blah, 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 then I can finally publish this too, and I will also attach all the raw data. The other published ones, to which I compared, was my side project where I collected all the measures, stabilized group measurements. They are also available on my access. If you're interested, I can give the links. So yes, all of the raw data, if anyone wants to repeat the same calculations or statistical tests, will be available once I have.
Thank you. Good. Are there any more questions, either in the room or from our online audience? I cannot. Okay, there is a question at the back. If you could introduce yourself.
My name is Han Gyo-jung from South Korea. First, thanks to all panels for great presentations. I'd like to ask one question to Miss Vera Haponava. Yes. Could you explain why did you choose Połack and Pahošča for your study? And yes.
Usually we're expected to come up with the research topic, like your research questions, and then take a sample that comes from research questions. But in archaeology, where you just get what you get, it is quite common, and it was my case too, to begin by, okay, what samples do you have available? And it appears so that most of human remains that we have available are those from the 7th millennium. Because before that, people were cremated. We do not have almost any bones older than the beginning of the 2nd millennium. So when I chose my samples, it was based on the idea that I contacted some people from Połack University, figured out what samples they have, and then just wrote everything that they have. The same with the National Academy. So, let's say, combination of networking and availability of samples.
Is this topic not political at all? I hope so.
Yes.
Sometimes you never know.
Topic which is not political in Belarus, if you really want it. Recently, I may share this fun fact that recently some Russian colleagues of ours with some of the people from Belarusian archaeological institutions whom I know published a paper titled First Isotopic Measurements from the Territory of Belarusian People and so on, which never mentioned any previous works which already obtained some samples and discussed this stuff, which from scientific point of view, I can't explain very well because I expect someone to describe the existing state of knowledge first. So I just have to suspect that there must be something political about it not being able to mention other people who published something on the topic because these people are possibly blacklisted.
Thank you very much. I like to type this question because it's difficult for me to imagine how you can combine the topic of religion in Belarus and the remains of Kiev. But there is a question, right? It's a theme of the press here, so the link. So if there are no other questions, I suggest that we have a break now, and we have some cold drinks and some cold coffee, not that much. But if you want to have a proper hot coffee, you can find it downstairs. We'll also have some sweet stuff, croissants, things like that. And I don't know, do you want you to say a few words now about what people can do with the books which are in the room, and maybe about your publishing house, Moderator, because it's still helpful.
Well, guys, I'm going to one from. Publishing house based in London and we specialize in books in Belarus and about Belarus. So at the back we have some our books printed, published, edited, published in London, and books from other publishing houses in the diaspora, Belarus and diaspora. I couldn't bring everything that we have. We have hundreds of them in London. More will be available tomorrow in the library. So if you would like to buy, just browse, buy. I'll be very happy. I'll be very happy to talk about them. And if you're interested in Belarusian publishing in the diaspora, actually there is now a term for that. I heard extraterritorial Belarusian publishing. Apparently, it's been now used in ASIS in one of the panels in November. That's going to happen in Chicago. So we'll be discussion on extraterritorial Belarusian publishing. So we're part of that. I'll be very happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's thank all the panelists once again by giving them a round of applause.